So, I'm going to talk to you today about ponds and water gardens. Our family is, I'll tell you how we actually came to this pond. We did not dig this pond ourselves. I need to give you a little bit of background, which is why it's probably not going to follow all of the things that the best pond would have. When we bought our property, there was a piece of property next to us. The people that owned it, she was a master gardener. They had created this pond and they had this property. He was trying to sell the house. There was a half acre with a pond. It was when the market crashed. So we said, hey, we'll buy your half acre. So we ended up incorporating this pond into our property. So that's how we inherited the pond. So, okay. Now, when you're wanting to have a pond, or if you're interested in having a pond, you probably have some reasons why you want to have one. And why a pond? And I say a water garden because some people want a smaller feature. You don't have the room for a bigger pond. Ours is it's probably less than a third acre. I'm actually not even really sure how big our pond is, but it's bigger than a water garden, but it's smaller than like a half acre pond. So one thing that you probably want to consider is, are you wanting to add some interest to your landscape? You want something pretty? Do you want something relaxing? In our case, if I was to add a pond, which we already have it, but if I were going to add one, it would have been for wildlife, to have birds and insects and amphibians and all sorts of little critters running around. We love that here at the Bowen household. A lot of people like water gardens for the calming aspect of it, to hear the water flowing, or if you have a bubbler, waterfall, etc. Some people want to have a pond as a form of entertainment. If you want to stock it, if you have the property to stock it with fish, or some people have a swimming pond. I did not do a lot of research on the swimming pond because I just didn't do it on the swimming pond because I don't want to really swim in a pond. So, to be quite honest. And then I did read some places, and if you watch the construction going on around South Lake Colleyville, a lot of people add ponds to their property, especially if it's big. And so it can add some resale value to your home, depending on who is obviously buying your home. Okay, these are all the things that you need to consider when you're deciding on a water garden or a pond. Number one, what is your purpose of it? Is your pond specifically going to be for plants? Some people just want a pond, just a little pond, just to have some aquatic plants, wildlife, water, sound, all of those. Now, your decision will affect the type of pond and your needs. Our pond does not have a filter. I don't even think it was lined, because we've actually had to dig it out before, and we've had to remove the silt buildup. So a lot of those mechanical things that a pond probably should have, if it's bigger, ours does not have. So we have to do other things to keep it healthy. If you want aquatic plants, then designing shelves is important. So when you're deciding on a pond, there's a way you can do it where you add shelves to put certain plant life on. You can stagger it down and do that with plant baskets and so forth, so that your plants stay in one spot. I'm actually probably getting ahead of myself, but that's an important thing. And then however your house is designed, do you want it to be a focal point? Do you want it off your back patio? Do you want it to be near your sitting area? For us, when we built it, it's far away from our house, but we could sit actually where I'm sitting right now, and I can actually look out the window and I could actually see the pond. And during the winter, before we had the horrible what was it, 60 plus days of 100-degree weather, we had a beautiful possum haul on a little island in the pond. And so when everything was bare, you could see the possum haul and all of the berries. Well, it's gone now, but it ended up being a really beautiful focal point at one point in time. So that's what you need to think of as far as purpose and function. And then construction obstacles. Once again, like I said, we didn't have those obstacles because it was there. But these are things that you need to think of. Do you need a permit to build your pond or water feature? I've researched it. Most likely not, unless your pond is going to be an acre or more, or unless you have an HOA. Some of you live in an HOA. They have specific rules about certain things you can do to your landscape, with what you can have, what you cannot have. So you should always make sure, if you live in an HOA, to check. Then you need to consider the dig as far as, are you tree roots that you might be disturbing? Are there any gas lines or utility lines? Anything underground that you might come in contact with? And I believe the utility number, I think it's 811, that you can call, and they can let you know the lines that are underground. Also make sure that your dig is not over important pipes like septic tanks, etc. I know on our street here in Colleyville, at one point in time, everyone had a septic tank, and actually 2 homes still on our cul-de-sac do have septic tanks. So if they were to do that, they would need to be careful of that issue. Then you want to pay attention to overhead obstacles, power lines, tree limbs, especially if you're renting equipment. And the reason I bring that up, and I'll show you some pictures when we get to that section. We built our home, we knocked down an existing home. And so the pond was on the other property. Well, we were adding a stream to that pond. And so we didn't have to really worry, for the most part, about trees on where the house was, because we have a stream going from the house down to the pond. We did have to worry about the trees a little farther down. And we did rent equipment. We end up using I guess that's called a ripper, whatever ripped for the swimming pool, because we are here in Colleyville where we're on a lot of rock. It's like a rock quarry, actually, pretty much where we live. So we actually used a big ripper just to rip our stream, and which saved, obviously, a lot of work by doing that. But we had to pay attention to everything that was around us. And then if you're going to use boulders or rocks and you want to get a bobcat and all those things in there, you definitely want to make sure you have enough room. And I will give you a little suggestion. If you are ever renting equipment, if you rent it on a Friday, you can pay a one-day rental and have it the whole weekend. And it's just a lot cheaper to do that. We've done that quite a few times with Sunbelt Rentals. We are a project family. So therefore, we like to do a lot of our own projects, which takes longer, but we always learn something. So we'll go rent something and bring it over here and go across the property with it. So it's a good thing to do if you want to cut down on costs. Just rent it on a Friday. Okay, the next thing you want to consider is your water drainage. Like I said, once again, our case, the pond is away from the house, but you definitely want to make sure that the water runoff is away from your home, because if your pond were to get too full, you don't want it running back into your foundation and possibly causing problems. And if there's a way to prevent runoff from draining into your pond, because rainwater can carry insecticides or other toxic chemicals, that would be good. However, in our pond, the previous owner, there's a huge pipe coming from the front of the house. There's still a house on the other part of the property. And so there's a huge pipe coming from his property on the side, and it goes down into our pond. I don't really know how to fix that because I would have to go, I think, on the other property and someone else owns it now. So we have a few issues that, had we just built our pond, we wouldn't have, but it works. We're making it work, so it's okay. Then the strength of the filter. So filtration is important, especially, if you have little ponds, etc. You want to think about the filtering system before the pond plans are set in stone, because a lot of times you get sediment and it collects at the bottom, and at some point it must be cleared out. We have actually, the year that we had the really hot temperatures, we actually let our pond get pretty close to being dry. And then we pulled all of our silt out. We got a machine and pulled all of our silt out to the very bottom because it had built up. We don't know how long it had built up, because at that point in time, the pond had only been ours for a year. And at that point in time, we had a swan in it that we inherited with the pond. And so we had to get like a little pool for the, swan to swim around in while we, took all the silt out of the bottom of the pond, because there was quite a bit of silt. I think the pond had been there for 30 years. Maybe he had cleaned it out. We weren't really sure. And by doing that, that definitely did help to clear our pond up some. So it did look a lot better once we did that. The next thing is plan your water's pathway. So your water's journey will determine the pump needed. Obviously, if you're going to have a waterfall or any type of running water, you're going to have some type of pump for that. Depending on the size of your waterfall, it will require a stronger pump. I was going to video our waterfall, but the freeze broke our pump and all of our pipes. So I don't have we're replacing it right now. So I don't have a picture of the waterfall running. And then the cost for doing all of these things, the things that you really need to think about is the materials. If you're lining it, most ponds you're going to line. Ours is not lined, probably because it's bigger. He had lined our whole hill because at some point in time, the previous owner from the pond had some type of stream going somewhere. And so I have pulled up a lot of liner like all over the hill. So it's still there. It has lasted, but I don't know exactly what he had done. So for sure, materials, you're going to need liner, pump, fountains, skimmers if necessary, rocks, boulders, any of those type of things. And then obviously plants. And then, like I said earlier, the cost of machinery, if you want to do it yourself, it's a lot cheaper, or you can hire a landscape company. And they vary anywhere from probably like $1,200 to like $9,000 or more. It's just depending on how big your pond is, how intricate you want it to be. Obviously, if you're going to have like a koi pond, I know some of you have a koi pond, the fish and the different things that you add to that will also be costly as well. So those are some of the things that you need to consider. Now, this is what our pond looked like when we started making. Down here is the pond. And so at one point in time, there was a fence through here. So all of this right here, we had ripped. And you see that there are a lot of rocks placed. Well, at this point in time, all of the liner had been put down. And my husband and one of my ex-students actually did all this themselves. So this was quite a project. We were having a wedding within like 3 months of this. So we were having to hurry up and do this. Our daughter got engaged in August and decided to get married at our house. We're like, whoa, we've got to get this done. So, so this is at the beginning of the stream. So what we have from our porch is there's actually a waterfall. And so we had to buy some big boulders to put in. All the other little ones that you see, all of these are from our property, but like this boulder we purchased this one, but all these tiny, well, they're not tiny, but all these other little rocks were from our property. So we were very fortunate to have material to work with. So what we have, you can tell right here, the pump comes in from here and it brings it up from the pond. So we just recirculate water, which is another way to keep our pond aerated during the summer so that you have some running water in order to help with the oxygenation and to help with the algae. We still get algae, but we do have some things that help move the water along. And so that is our waterfall. I'm sorry, I don't have a video of it right now. And then you can see, this is a little cleaner picture. Once we had more of the liner laid down, and then we just went through, well, I couldn't pick up those rocks, but my husband and Micah went through and they just started placing rocks just along the edge. And then we also have landscaping that goes beside it. And that's kind of how we did ours as far as the stream and everything. Okay, this is right here. This is a dry creek bed that actually is the part where I told you I needed to do this because I have runoff going into the pond from where the previous owner has this huge intake where we don't have any gutters. Let me just back up. We don't have gutters in our neighborhood for runoff water. So what he had done, and I think he had done it to fill the pond, was he created a runoff spot along the side of the street that collects the water. Well, this big, huge PVC pipe runs from the side parkway through underneath our fence and into this area. So I don't know how far the pipe goes. We have not dug it out. It obviously goes all the way to the pond, but I don't want to mess with, there's other boulders and rocks. So we just made a dry creek bed during the COVID quarantine last year and just dug all of it out, lined it, put some rock in it, and then used all these other rocks right here from our property to outline it. Then this is on the other side of the pond. He originally had some type of stream here, and this creek bed is to drain it from when it is full. So when it is full, it actually starts running down my hill. So we made another dry creek bed, dug this out, lined it, put rock in it, outlined it. And so it actually goes to the bottom of the hill. And though it looks like a wild forest there, it gets kind of wild over there. But let's see what I need to tell you about that. When you're doing this, right there, this is prior to digging it all the way. In the middle, you need to make a dry creek bed if you're trying to drain the water a bit deeper, like in this part. So I had to go through and make all this middle part a bit deeper so that it would flow easier. And that was a pretty big task, but it was fun. Okay, now I'm going to jump real quick to some different types of pond or water garden shapes, because when you're thinking about your pond, you need to think about what type of shape. Our pond is round. Well, it's not perfectly round, but it's round. And so that's how ours is. But some people, if you want a kidney shape, that's what it might look like. You can tell theirs is right off the back porch. Some people want square or rectangular, and that's all going to be, person specific. It's going to have to do with what is your landscape like. Some people are more formal, so they probably want straight lines. Some people don't mind if there's some curves. Our property is more natural. Our house is like more of a Mediterranean type look where it's not the real formal look. So, and I'm kind of one of those gardeners. I kind of toss in something to see if it works. I'm not real organized, I should say. I'm not an organized gardener. I know some of you are, but that's not me. I have all sorts of things going on my property. So those are two different types right there. You can tell both of those have waterfalls because you do want to keep the water circulated, especially if you have fish. You definitely need to make sure that your water is circulating. You don't want it just stagnant or standing still. I thought this was really cute, this little koi pond right here. It's a circular one, and you can see all the different types of materials that are used. It looks like right here they'd use some type of, wood. Who knows? It could be thick bamboo. I'm not even sure. And had rocks on the top, but that's a cute little pond. And right over here, you can't really see it, but water is coming in. So once again, if you have fish, you do want to have water circulating. And then this pond over here is just a natural pond. It's just meant just to look natural. They did build in here. You can see right here, they've got some ledges or some shelving for some of their plants, which once again helps your plants not to spread, which I've had a problem with in my pond. And that is a constant maintenance issue. And I'll talk more about that. This is another picture of a natural backyard water garden. It's not very big. And the deepest part, you can tell, is in the middle, but they have all different types of plants. They've got, thin rock. They've got a little waterfall that's coming right through here. So that's just another example. And you can see the different type of media that they use. They've used flat rocks. They have some little rocks. They have gravel. Then they've got some aquatic plants in here. I really like this little water garden right here. I think it's beautiful. Okay, this is a picture of a koi pond. And I know some of you have koi ponds, and I'm jealous, but I probably won't ever have one because it seems like everything I research, they're pretty labor intensive. That's my take on it. Some of you could probably let me know otherwise, but once again, you see the water, and it's just beautiful. And koi ponds to me are very, very, very relaxing. They're tranquil. So you might want to have a spot where you can sit by and have a bench where you can go sit with your family or your grandkids. Some of you may have more Japanese themed house, and that would definitely go with that. But they're really beautiful. Now, some people do not have a space. They don't have space for large ponds, so they might want just a really small water feature. You can use really small water features for decks and patios, really tiny, small places. If you just have a really, say, a corner, this is in a corner. If you have a corner and you just want something there, maybe you don't want to put a tree there. Maybe it's outside your bedroom window or outside your living room. You want to leave your windows open. Well, you could just have a little tiny little water space like this. You can use decorative pots. You can even have them on your porch. And they're strictly decorative. You're not going to want to stick some fish in something like this. And they're pretty low maintenance. That's another thing to think about, because some people don't mind the maintenance of ponds or water features, but some people just want to look at it. They don't want to spend a lot of their time doing that. So that would be great for that type of person. These are some examples of some container ponds, and you can tell, I mean, this one right here, these are just whiskey barrels, and they just made it where it flows into the other one, or you could just have one, and they set them on pallets. Fairly inexpensive. You can buy whiskey barrels at Home Depot, Lowe's for $50, $60. Line them yourself if you're a do-it-yourselfer, and create just a simple little container garden. And then this was this was a neat little thing as well, where they had that going into a little pond. And I really love this one. I actually have an extra planter like this. I could really do something like that. Just has a couple little, got some water lettuce. You have a water lily and some of the water grasses, and just a beautiful little water garden. And that wouldn't be any maintenance at all. You wouldn't have to really clean it out or skim it. And if you skim it, you could do it with a little fish net, not having to wade into the water to get all the muck out. Now they have raised or above ground ponds, which you'll see those a lot of times. I don't ever think I've ever seen one at someone's house, although, because I just don't know anyone that has one. But usually at restaurants you'll go to, or just different places across the world, and they're always beautiful. And they're easy. They're less labor intensive as well. Same effects as an in-ground pond. It's just above ground, great for smaller areas. You can even buy kits to assemble to do an above ground pond. You can still have your plant life. You can put some little lilies in there and all of these different type of plants. And this is another example of a raised pond. It's more symmetrical. And you'll see they've got the little corner things where they actually just put some potted plants in, and just so they can have a water element. And then this is strictly a plant pond. It's just an in-ground plant pond. When you're building these ponds, when they're in the ground, you at least want them to be 2 feet at least in the center, 2 feet deep. If you want to gradually go into it, you can, but at least 2 feet in the center. These are great for plant lovers. They're less maintenance than a fish pond, because when you have fish in your pond, you have all these other elements that go with it because of their waste. Small wildlife. I will have to tell you that our pond, my neighbor asked me one time, "What is that noise that comes from your property?" I said, "Oh, are you talking about the frogs?" And he said, "Yes." And they live probably about 4 houses down the other way, not even on our street, because we have so many frogs. We have bullfrogs. We have these tiny little green tree frogs. We have, I don't know how many species of frogs here, but it is really beautiful in the summer when the sun goes down, and there's like a melody, and it is loud, and you can hear it seriously 4 houses down, and it's beautiful. And so we get a lot of wildlife. Just like this pond would get a lot of wildlife. If you're interested in, frogs and salamanders and newts and, insects and dragonflies. And since I'm a beekeeper, I have hives in my backyard, and there's one little area in my pond that they always go to. They go to this one area to drink water. They don't go to the whole pond. It's just one small area and these group of rocks. I can always walk by, hear my bees buzzing, and they're just right there. So if you like wildlife, that's great. Now, one thing about water, water does attract snakes. I know a lot of us don't like snakes. I don't like snakes. We have snakes at our property here. We would still have them without the water, but with the water, it is an extra thing to think about. We have killed quite a few copperheads at our house. And so if you don't want additional snakes, you might not want a pond, because little snakes will find your pond. And this is just a little mini backyard pond. And you can tell this pond is not big at all. Just a little bitty pond, has a few little goldfish in it. And you would get your desired effect in a flower bed, wherever you want something, a little bit of pop or a little bit of interest. One thing about goldfish, I've done an experiment, and I just bought like 15 goldfish because I have some in a rain barrel on my driveway for my grandkids. And that's another thing. If you have a rain barrel and you want to get rid of mosquitoes, just go buy some cheap fish and throw them in there, and they'll eat the mosquito larvae. So I bought 15 extra and threw them in our pond. I probably now have about 1,000 goldfish. But I mean, they're multiplying, and I thought they were dead. I didn't see them, but I saw them the other day and they're alive and well. So I have goldfish all in my pond, and I don't do anything. I don't feed them, and I don't go the extra mile for them. If they're there, that's great. And if they're not, that's just how nature planned it. Okay, this pond is beautiful. I love this pond. This is just a wildlife pond. So this is going to be actually just in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. And it just works on natural operation through the natural processes. No liner is necessary, which is kind of like our pond. You can aerate via a fountain or stream. So there's probably some little stream here. I didn't get it in this picture that feeds this. Usually on a natural pond, you want it to be at least 32 inches, at least, the depth, and sunny location for plant life to grow. That's really, most ponds you want to have in the sun. You don't want to have them buried under a tree, because all of those leaves and the foliage that drops will go into the pond. We do have some trees around our pond, which there's a couple of bald cypress, but we have some other trees that I know have grown up over the years. We don't get too many leaves in there. We mainly get the foliage that gets in there is really, I have a bunch of Louisiana iris. They were there. I didn't plant, and I have to be very conscientious about raking up the foliage. So I've already been doing that, because after the winter, we did not have a strong winter until the 1 week of winter, and all of the foliage from my Louisiana iris died back. So I've been raking it out of there, because it will go to the bottom and create a lot of problems. So I've been raking it out, and it hasn't made it to my compost bin yet, but it will be going to my compost bin or my compost pile. Okay, so healthy and balanced ecosystem. I wish my pond looked like this, but this is in Crested Butte, Colorado, where all of their ponds look beautiful. But in order to have a healthy ecosystem, you need filtration, aeration, aquatic plants, and if you have fish, that's great. And then the natural bacteria that is in the pond. And all those things should always work together. You really shouldn't have to put chemicals in your pond. My husband one time sprayed or did these copper pellets, but I really don't want any of that going on our property. I'm trying to be as natural as possible. I've got bees, now I have chickens and I have grandchildren. So I try and keep everything on our property as natural as possible. I don't spray insecticides. I don't do any of that stuff. I can't help what other people do around me, but I know on my property, I'm trying to keep it healthy. And even fertilizing, you really want to be careful if you have a pond. If you're putting something out on your grass, you really want to keep it away from the pond, because you don't want that leaching into the pond, because that extra fertilizer will end up fertilizing different plants in your pond, which then could increase your algae or whatever, and then you get a big algae bloom. So you really need to be careful around a pond and what chemicals you're putting into it. Okay, talking about aeration. Subsurface aeration works from the bottom up, and it circulates the water while in the process dissolving of the oxygen levels. Now, we don't have a quote aerator in our pond. We have a fountain, and I had this man come over a couple of years ago and talk to us about this, because in our pond, which is another thing I would not recommend doing, there is this island. I don't really want to call it an island. It's more of it's an island, but it's not an island you could really do anything on. It's this mound of dirt surrounded by rocks with a few trees that have grown unintentionally there. I think it's a hackberry. I don't even know what kind of tree it is because I'm not going to walk out in that water and get up on that mound of dirt. But so we have this this little island. The problem is that there's probably 3 feet between one part of the island and the side. Well, that water in the summer, when it gets hot, it doesn't circulate right there. Well, therefore, when you get water that's not circulating, you get that stagnant water. And we all know that stagnant water is definitely not healthy. That water can be toxic. You know, I have 2 golden retrievers, and they love to jump in the pond. And I really don't even want them getting over in that area, which they haven't so far, but doesn't mean they won't because of what might be in that. So we had someone come over, and we're probably going to have to put a bubbler on that side. But once again, now you're looking at how am I going to get electricity over there? It's all these things that we need to think about since we inherit, you know, we bought the pond after the fact. It's all these other little things that we find new problems all the time. I still love my pond, but there's just issues that we have to figure out. So, you don't have to buy quote, and they're expensive. Aerators are expensive, but you can buy a fountain, which is less expensive, and it keeps the water moving, and that does a great job too. And I actually had a pond man tell me that. Then without oxygen at the bottom of the pond, the anaerobic bacteria, and it lives without oxygen, produces an acid environment. And then that just you start creating a problem. When you get an acid environment, things aren't moving well. Then you're going to start having algae growth. And algae growth is not all bad. It's only when it gets, when it really gets out of control. A little bit of algae is okay. A little bit of algae is healthy, but you don't want it to get to where your whole pond is taken over with algae. That is not good. Aeration can be formed by water movement, such as submerged aerators, fountains, streams, waterfalls, anything that helps the water to circulate or move. So we do have a stream which pours in there. We have a waterfall at the top when we have it on, which it's not on right now, so it's not circulating because it's broken. But that will be moving hopefully soon. And then our pond fountain will be back in operation soon. But all those things are important because when it is not moving, and thank goodness it hasn't been hot yet, because our water is still right now. We don't have any movement to our water at the present time, which it has been making me a little nervous. I've been watching it, you know, daily. But for the algae to really start taking off, the water needs to be about 75 degrees. So I'm pretty sure it's not there yet because it hasn't been that warm. Okay, that's just a pretty picture I put in here because I really wished that my pond looked like that all the time. But it doesn't. But I thought that was a really beautiful picture. And those are the type of things that people love about the water. You see the sun reflecting, and a lot of people like fountains. And so, but that's going to take work. If you have a pond that's big, just know it's not going to do that all by itself. Okay. These are some of the issues you can get on a pond. Now, this is called duckweed and watermill. I have not experienced this on my pond, and it seems like this happens on ponds that are a bit bigger. Now, duckweed is a problem, but then again, some farmers want it on their pond for their livestock. So while it's a nuisance to some, it's a benefit to others. So, I thought that was very interesting, but you can see it just makes an entire film. And this duckweed, they're just little plants with little teeny tiny little leaves. It's not like getting an algae where it is really clinging. These are just like little cute leaves. And this is another pond that is totally covered with duckweed. And you can see the ducks are all in it, which doesn't look very appetizing. Okay, this kind of algae we have had in our pond. And this algae is very, very stringy. This algae, definitely, it starts growing, excuse me, when it's warmer and it's hair-like. And this is the type that attaches to rocks. You will sometimes see this algae if you're ever by a river or a stream, and sometimes you'll see the strings and they're kind of flowing as the river is running over the rocks, as the water is running over the rocks. That's what this type of algae is. And it usually occurs after a rainy period, because usually after a rainy period, it'll be high in phosphorus. And excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink of water. So that usually just occurs because it's high in phosphorus, is when you get that stringy algae. And a lot of times on this type, you just have to rake it out. That's what we do. We get a rake. My husband will put on his waders and he will go out in the pond and just rake it, rake all the muck out. That's really all we know, to do, because we're going to have to do it ourselves, because we're not going to pay someone to go do it. That's how we operate at our house. Okay. Now this is my pond several years, like a long time ago. And you can see it. This is when we were letting it all just go down. This was that hot summer. Things are not looking good. You can see this is the pond fountain. You can see that where the pipes and everything are. Actually, we don't even have this oleander anymore. That oleander ended up dying. I don't even know what these things were, but our pond was looking really, really bad. So and you can see back here, this is all that algae I was telling you about that my husband would rake out. And then this is that island I was talking about. There's a little bit of water that goes around it. So what we actually did, we actually dug some of this back out to make it deeper, because it had gotten pretty shallow, a lot of silt in here. I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's pretty shallow right there because the silt had built up. These right here are the water irises, which they're horrible, because when they were put in this pond, they were not put in a water basket. So they have become invasive. I have them all over here now. I have them over here. I have them all along this shore, and I've been cutting them back every year. If anyone would love to come have a dig at my house and dig up some water irises, I'd love for you to have some. If you need any, I'll help you dig them out, because they're tubers. And I think, when they get disturbed, they move. So that's been an issue in our pond as well, is having too many water irises and not having them in a water basket where you can contain the plant, because obviously they're just going to go everywhere. So in this right here, you can see, this pond does not look like a very fun place to live. If you're any type of animal, and I didn't even want to walk in this pond. Matter of fact, I did not get in our pond. So we dug all this out. All these are no longer there. Let's see what else has changed about this pond. I've lost mimosa. I've lost this mimosa tree. I just lost that this last year. I have something that keeps some kind of thing that keeps getting my mimosa trees. I've lost like 3 of them. So I don't know what's going on. Okay, this is a plant, but it's algae, but it looks like a plant. I don't know if when you, like seaweed from the ocean, this is what this is like. It's chara. It's also known as muskgrass. And this usually grows, though, in larger ponds. I have not seen this in our pond. You're not going to most likely see it in a little small water garden. But that's chara. That's another little algae. Okay, this algae is planktonic algae. This algae is microscopic, and this is the most common type of algae. If you drive by and see any of the ponds in this area, a lot of times you'll see a pond that looks like this. That's because it's planktonic algae. And it turns it like a green pea color. It's free floating. and it appears quickly, and it really comes when it really starts getting hot. It's like your pond will look great, and then in 2 or 3 days, if the weather has really boosted up, it can start looking like this. Now, to control this, you can use algicide, which we have done one time. Like I said, I don't want to use that stuff on our property. So looking more towards the pond plants, which the Louisiana iris, which is what I have, those plants are helpful in eliminating and filtering a lot of these bacteria and algae. So there's a good thing about them, and then there's a bad thing about some of the plants that you have. So that's what we've used. I am in the process. I've just ordered some more plants. I've never done it before. I have ordered some water lilies to hopefully cover some of the pond. I'm going to try and get like 50% of it covered so that it won't heat up as much, which is, why people usually use water lilies. So I ordered some. I don't think I will get them for probably April or May. They don't ship them until it gets warmer, for your zone, which right now they need to wait probably about a month more. So the plant life is really important, and that is how I'm trying to control our pond. So we're doing a little bit better with it. Okay, this algae is the algae that I'm scared of. That's why I get really nervous when our pond gets really scummy looking on the other side of the island. Everyone has heard about this, whether it's the blue-green algae or not. This is the one that's highly toxic. This is the one that when you hear of children swimming in a lake and they end up dying from something within 24 hours or several days, this is the algae you want to stay away from. It's very harmful. It's in stagnant water. If there's ever stagnant water, do not go into it, just for the simple fact you shouldn't be in stagnant water. But this right here is blue-green algae bloom. It's highly toxic. It can also be red. It can also be brown. I couldn't find a picture of any that was red or brown to show you, but you can see over here, there's a little bit right there, but, and it smells bad. No one wants to get in water anyway that smells bad. It's foamy. If you ever see water that's foamy, you definitely need to stay away from it as well. This can also, it's not just fresh water. This can also occur in marine water. So if you happen to see that in the ocean, or maybe you're on a river that that ends up like in Belize. I was there on a mission trip one time, and the river actually opens up into the ocean. If you even see it right there, it's still bad water. So avoid any type of water that you see like that. It's not going to most likely be in your little bitty water garden. So that's not really something you need to worry about. But all of the algae that I'm talking about, obviously, if you're dealing with water, algae can be an issue. And so that's something that you need to think about. If you have a little water garden, it's going to be easier to control. If you have something bigger like we have, and it's not even that big, we have found that it is difficult to control some of these things, especially because we didn't start out owning the pond. We don't know everything that went into that. And so it's been a little challenging for us. It's definitely just been a learning process. Okay. Now this is what our stream looks like with water in it. And this is what it looks like completed going down to the pond. So we do have water that runs down to our pond. That's the island. And what I was talking about, there's a little bit right back there that doesn't circulate. But you see these right here. These are the water iris. When we bought our property and bought that pond, they were not there at all. So they have quickly taken over. And I think what also happened, I think when we went in and we drained the pond, I think we may have moved unknowingly. I didn't even know they were there. move some of those roots around because we dug out some stuff. And so now we have all of these that keep coming up over here that every year I'm having to pull out. I mean, I've got them coming up now. I pulled all of them out last year, every single one of them, by the roots, or what I thought was all of them, but obviously not. There's still some roots that are, or little tubers that are in there. So we want to be able to see our pond. So therefore I can't see it with all of this in the way, which is one of those things you need to think about. There's no point in having a pond if I can't see it. So once again, I'll be pulling more of that stuff out. While they're good, they definitely filter. They can be invasive. So if you're looking to build a bigger pond, once again, try and use some of the water baskets that you can put along the side of your pond. You can order them off Amazon. They're just baskets that filter and let the water in and out of. And that way your plants won't become invasive. And then this was just a close-up shot. My son took that of the water, you know, flowing to the pond. Okay. Oh, here it is. That now you can see it. It's just this little area back there that does actually get stagnant water, because while we have a fountain here, we actually have a different one now because that particular one went out. It does not, this water back here is stagnant. It doesn't really move. So that's probably where we're going to have to put a bubbler once we figure out how to get the electricity over there. And then you can see this was before they all grew up. And
solar.
Do what? Okay. And then this is another reason to have a pond. You can sit out there with your little grandchild. I just had to put that one in there with my husband. They were just sitting there. And at one point in time, we had some ducks. I mean, they weren't ours, they were nature's ducks, but they lived in our pond. And so we would feed the ducks all the time. I don't have any ducks now. I keep trying to lure some back, or I keep hoping some geese will land in our pond, but they don't. So maybe one day. Okay, now in this right here, what's going on in this photo? Okay, you've got some little submerged pond plants, and you see you've got a frog in there. And that's what we want in our pond. Even if you have a little water garden, you will have that in your little water garden. Okay, so balancing a pond naturally. Okay, plants help with filtration. Once again, the deal with electricity. You may have a problem getting electricity because our pond is so far away from our house. We do have a well down there, which we actually, I guess we put a well in about 3 years ago so we can keep our pond at a constant level so it's not constantly draining and looking unsightly. So we do have a well. So we do have some electricity down there. However, it would have to go on the other side of the pond. Once again, that's an additional cost. Get an electrician, find someone to do it, and etc. Once again, flowing water, the street turns the water to avoid the stagnancy. Once again, having a water feature, a fountain performs as an aerator, and you don't need electricity if you have plants. So you're going to really have to research all the different plants. There are so many plants that can be invasive. And then when I was researching, it was a bit overwhelming because certain states won't let you have certain plants because of the waterways. So you really have to look up what will Texas allow, you know, and so forth, so that you don't get something that's invasive that might, you know, happen to be transferred somewhere else in a waterway. We have a creek close to us, so we would probably have to be careful about that. The natural beneficial bacteria is essential to the nitrogen cycle, the way everything cycles in the water. And then extra aeration attracts more animals. So the more your water is moving, the more animals you will have. We have, I haven't seen drinking. I haven't seen any of these drinking from our pond, but I'm sure they do. We have raccoons, like most everyone around here, bobcats, foxes. What am I missing? I mean, all those type of critters that you guys probably haven't seen, you hear everyone reporting on Next Door Neighbor app. We have all those. We have a lot of them in our neighborhood. And so I'm sure they come and drink from, our pond. Well, I also don't want them getting poisoned if we're putting stuff in our pond. So once again, we keep it natural. And another thing is we don't have a problem with mosquitoes. I'm not saying they don't bite my husband, but if you walk by our pond, it's not like it's a mosquito factory. So something at least is going on right. Half of the time, because we don't have mosquitoes. It's not like a mosquito pit there. So by having everything balanced, that will definitely help with that. And we do have little goldfish that will eat the eggs. Now, this is a whole cycle, and this is really, it's just talking about if you have, and this is using a fish, because when fish eliminate into the water, and not everyone, once again, wants a pond with fish, but some of you might want a little water garden with fish. You have to pay attention that they do use the bathroom in the water. So when they do that, then you have the fish elimination, it turns into ammonia. So you have a whole process that is taking place. Well, in order to help with that process, it helps to have plants in there and to have your water being moved around. So once again, if you're going to have fish, you need to think about that. This pond right here is so pretty. It looks just like, it's just a little natural. It looks like a little water pond. It's shallow. They've got the elements. They have a waterfall. They've got these beautiful irises. Theirs are purple, and all sorts of little plants that it looks just absolutely perfect. It's maybe, I don't even know if this one's actually 2 feet deep. It actually looks like it might just be a foot to a foot and a half, possibly. I can't tell how big that boulder is, but that's a nice water feature right there, which would look good in anyone's yard if you have the space. Now, when you're thinking about plant life, there's different types of plants. So they have marginal plants, and those are the plants that roots, they're going to absorb the nitrogen, and they prefer their crown to be wet. Okay. Their crown and their feet to be wet. I accidentally left off the word feet. Sorry about that. And they thrive in about 6 inches of water. That's another picture of my irises, even more invasive. They've grown up all around. So while they're beautiful, they become invasive. I also have this plant that I actually did not know I had. And it just finally popped up last year. I did not plant it, so maybe it had been there. And I don't know if the irises had been crowding it out, but I pulled a lot of irises out. And this is pickerel weed. And it's beautiful, and it blooms, and it has these purple flowers on it. And it stays underwater. So it's not like it's on the side, but it's submerged about, I guess it's about 6 inches under the water, and then it blooms out. So therefore, it's also helping to filter. Then you can have bog or submerged plants. So submerged plants grow well underwater. They're totally underwater. If you need some of those for your water garden or your pond, I have not purchased any for mine. And they help to oxygenate the water. I need to research it more. I will probably get a few for my pond, but I don't know enough about it because there's so many. But these are some right here. These are some different ones. This one right here is hornwort. There's a mermaid plant, lemon bacopa. Those are some that can stay underwater. Bog plants, they send shoots and leaves above the water line, but they don't mind their feet being wet. And their root systems break down toxic nitrates and waste. And a lot of you probably already have these in your flower bed. You wouldn't even have to go buy any, such as cannas. I have so many cannas, I don't know what to do with them. So cannas, elephant ears, lilies, rudbeckia can even work. Astil and baptisia, all those plants can work as bog plants that you can put on the margin of your pond to add some color. And this was a picture. This right here is a still that's on the side of the pond. Then there's your floating plants. This, like I said, this is the first year I've ordered floating plants. I've been wanting to do it, and I finally decided to. So they provide needed oxygen and food for fish. They absorb excess carbon monoxide, helping to prevent murky water. There's different plants. This right here is water lettuce. This is a hardy water lily. There's so many beautiful water lilies to order. They're amazing. This right here is a little water fern. It kind of looks like a little mimosa leaf. That was my experiment. Those are some of my goldfish in my pond. Now, I went to the Texas AgriLife Extension office, and they actually have their whole, they have an aquatic section. These are the 2 that were within our vicinity. They had 6 listed, and I just wrote these 2 down, where you can get some fish and aquatic plants in this area. And you'll notice one's in Aledo, so it's still far. And then one's in Argyle. That one's actually not far. So that information is on here. I haven't talked to these individuals, but I pulled it off the Texas AgriLife site, which was actually pretty interesting. It's aquaplant.tamu.edu. I put on here, they have some upcoming virtual trainings, actually, one on aquatic herbicide and permitting. And I'm sure this is probably for people that have bigger ponds, not water gardens, but some of you might be interested in that. I'm actually kind of interested in it. And so I really want to do both of these. And the June 15th one is aquatic vegetation, beneficial or pests. That one I'm really interested in, because I think they're really going to go over what will be good for, it's probably geared more towards bigger ponds, but I'm always up for learning, so I think it'd be very interesting. Then they have some online courses. They have an aquatic vegetation management basic course, which is an hour. Then they have an algae and floating aquatic identification and control course, which is an hour, which I'm definitely going to want to do that because you can do it self-paced. And then they have a submerged aquatic plant identification and control, 1.5 hours. And I figured we have a pond, we have some property on a river. I might as well learn some more about aquatic plants, because I don't know as much as I need to about what lives in and under the water. I just don't. And so that was my presentation on ponds. I know it wasn't technical because I'm not a technical person. Oh, are y'all going to tell me some of these questions?
Yes, I think we have quite a few. Oh, very nice. How deep is your pond, Sandra?
Okay, our pond, and we dug it out. So our pond is, well, currently we probably need to empty the silt, get the silt out again, but we dug it to about 7 feet in the center.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's about 7 feet deep. I mean, we really dug it back. We got some machinery in there and dug it back. Because like I said, we don't know how deep it was originally, but there was a lot of silt in it. I mean, a lot of silt. So it was in pretty bad shape. It could be in better shape, but I'm working on it. It's just trying to figure it all out.
Lisa's doctor asks, what makes your pond high in phosphorus? Is it fertilizer runoff?
Fertilizer, yes.
Grapevine had an episode of the stringy algae a while back.
Yes, it's the fertilizer runoff, which is why I was concerned. I can't, I guess I could rip it up. I just don't know how to, the runoff, like I said, from the street and from everyone else's property runs down into our pond. And I think he did that to fill the pond. And who knows, now this is probably 40 years ago when he created this pond, probably wasn't thinking about runoff into a pond, but maybe 40 years ago, they weren't using fertilizer like they are now. So that is a concern. in my particular pond because I have runoff that I can't control.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, I mean, if we were to rebuild it, we would definitely, I mean, we wouldn't have that there. Now we have a well that can fill our pond, but we still have runoff from the neighborhood, and it's from the phosphorus is from the fertilizer from, other people. I don't know what everyone's doing around here.
Right. Well, Lisa also wants to know where you get your replacement mimosa trees.
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping if I have some little ones growing, I'm hoping to replant them. I've lost 3 big ones. I'm just sick about it. I don't know. I don't know and that's it within a year. It's like all of a sudden they started getting some type of sap. I didn't have a tree specialist come out here. And then all of a sudden they just died. It's like the branches just hardened up and then started cracking.
Yikes.
But I don't know where to get mimosa. I don't know where to buy mimosa trees. I did have another little one that I let grow up. It doesn't look very good, but I was just going to let it grow up in my garden and it died.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if I would try it again.
Yeah, and they were here. The lady that they used to have that property, so she had planted, she was a master gardener, and she had planted a bunch of beautiful, beautiful plants. And but the mimosa trees, I still have one that looks great. I'm hoping it doesn't die. I love them, but I don't know where to get mimosa trees.
Barbara Thompson wants to know, how do you get rid of duckweed? And also, what color are your Louisiana irises that she would like to try some yellow ones?
Mine are yellow, and she can have as many as she would like.
Okay.
I will give her some. I can actually, I'll dig her up some. I would not mind at all. Anyone who wants any yellow ones, you're more than welcome. I have plenty. So with the duckweed, they were talking about using a fertilizer, an herbicide to get rid of them. Yeah, I don't really want to put that in my pond. So, but I haven't had it. Now, I haven't had duckweed. So they're saying that normally occurs in bigger ponds, but then you also have to understand people order that. So people that have a pond and they have livestock, they will order duckweed for their pond.
Yikes.
I know it's interesting. It's just where, some plants are good, but then they're not good in some other cases. So I haven't had duckweed, but like I said, an herbicide of some sort will get rid of it.
I wondered if you can feed chlorinated city water into a plant pond. Is there a problem with having the chlorination?
Well, before we got our pond, we had to add water to it. We had to add a hose, and it didn't seem to hurt anything.
Okay.
I don't know if we were supposed to do that, but we did. We didn't have a way to get any water into it, especially when we had the really hot summer and we were going to have a wedding here. So we had to fill our pond with the city water. It was a very expensive bill, but now we do. We have a well now. So that's really been great. And that's another thing. The well will actually, when the pond starts going low, then the well just kicks on. So the pond is never low. And then, so we still have running water from there too. So we have several ways, for our water at least to be moving, which that's really the key is you want your water to be moving no matter what size water garden, whether it's a little bubbler. We have a fountain in our courtyard and it's just a bubbler, but it keeps it moving.
Yeah. Coral Gates says that duckweed can be invasive, and in Oklahoma, it has killed ponds.
I'm sure.
She has had to remove hers.
How did she remove hers? Did she use an herbicide?
Coral, can you unmute yourself and talk to us about that?
Yes, I had to use something. I also pulled a lot out by hand.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think because it got so hot, so cold up there that a lot of us had issues. Mine was a small pond, so it really started to take over. But I had friends with huge ponds like what you were showing.
Yeah.
It just started spreading, and then the green and the algicide in it was absolutely horrible. And then dying. Yeah, it just wasn't good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know it can be invasive, and that's why when I was doing the research, I was shocked that that people actually, I mean, they sell it. They sell it that you can
Right.
buy it, and people buy it when they have livestock for their livestock tanks. But they must have a lot of livestock that can go in there and, help to take care of it, which we don't have a livestock tank. We just have a little pond that I'm trying to keep it healthy on an experimental basis.
Well, Sandra, I don't have any more questions, but
Okay.
I want to commend you for all the hard work you've put into your pond, and a lot of the detail that you've given us there's a caution there, but there's also an encouragement. And the pictures of your pond don't even do it justice. When I saw it in person, it is just lovely.